Digital experiences within the digital performance lifecycle with Jonathon Wright. So in this session, I was going to talk around some new practices and principles. I'm going to talk about how you could potentially look at adopting minimum viable performance. So that's the smallest component you can run from a performance engineering perspective. Therefore, performance as code would be very important. So this ability to execute a number of lines of code, which you can check in to GitHub, which will then create the test and actually be able to run and execute performance engineering scripts. And then finally, which is the most important and most difficult component, is around test data as code. The ability to generate synthetic test data on demand as part of your continuous performance delivery pipeline. And what I'm going to demonstrate in this particular session is demos around introducing the concepts around chat ops, which will allow you to actually execute performance tests directly from Slack or Teams or any of your enterprise collaboration platforms, which allows you to move at an even faster speed. So, digital performance. Over the last few years, I've been working on large-scale projects from machine learning and artificial intelligence to smart cities. I recently did a TED talk on cognitive learning around some of the technologies which you can see on the lists below. However, today I wanted to talk to you around the digital performance lifecycle. And this is this ability to actually look at providing insight, intelligence, learnings, assessment, innovation continuously, so that way you can really focus on the value that you can bring to your organizations in these new, highly complex landscapes. So, what am I going to be discussing today and demonstrating as part of the demos? First is the continuous performance. How do you get it so that you get to a point where every time you do a check-in, you're going to be able to run some minimum viable performance scripts and get initial quick feedback from wherever you are, whether it's that developer machine, whether it's from a unikernel Mirage OS Docker container, or it could be just running into large-scale environments which you're building. Or you could be looking at more complex IoT, Internet of Things, or machine-to-machine endpoints, which we're going to see a lot more of. So therefore, this ability to write performance as code, so the example which I'm going to be giving you is going to be wrapping it in the standard workflow method XAML format, but this could be anything else. This could be XML, it could be a JSON file. All it is a case of a request or a response to a machine to actually kick off the job. Next is the test data as code. This is this ability to keep in the environment that you may be using. So in this case, I'm going to demonstrate Excel, but you could use it in any other format, your flat files, it could be a database, it doesn't really matter. What's important is this ability that you can replace a parameter with a dynamic value. So this is 3 or 4 steps beyond shared data table. So this ability that if you run out of data halfway through a massive soak or test, you can actually synthetically generate it on the fly. It will go off, it'll generate the necessary rows in the databases and allow you to pass that to your agents. So this is incredibly powerful, but it also requires you to model the data and understand the data dependencies of that. And then finally, as I mentioned before, is around enterprise collaboration, the ability to run in something like Slack to be able to kick off jobs using conversational AI. So you've got a lot of smart bots now, so they're going to get smarter and smarter. So they will be able to do most of these tasks and understand the dependencies of data automatically. So let's go into the demo. So this demo, I've used Visual Integration Processor, which is by Curiosity Software Island, a good friend of mine, Hugh Price. I've also demonstrated the HPE LoadRunner Community Edition. And now let's go straight into the demo. Okay, I've opened up this simple Truth client script, and as you can see, it's just navigating to a web page. But this could be an endpoint, this could be an IoT device, it could be a request-response pair. It doesn't really matter. But what we do is we can pass in a parameter. So in this case, I want to pass in the Vivit website, and I want it to run that same single web page and write it to a log. So as you can see, there's a wrapper around here. So what I've done is I've told the wrapper to output into a text file the results of what happens when it executes. So in this case, it's spinning up the network virtualization to give it the more realistic load pattern. And then what I'm doing is I've now got a request response time here of 1.9 seconds. So that's great. However, I've had to execute this directly from the HPE virtual user generator. Now I want to be able to call this directly at the command line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over the same script. So if you can see here, we've got the same script, but I'm going to run it at the command line. So a simple invoke to pass it over to an expression builder, which is literally just the path to the executor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that, but this time I'm running this from the command line. So you'll see this later in the video where we run this directly from Slack, but you could run it from anything. You could run it from Teams, you could run it from your continuous integration and build, Jenkins, whatever you want to do. So let's just quickly go back. What we'll see now is we'll see that this will have executed another script, but also what's more important, so you can see we've not got a 0.79 coming back. It's also written the logs into the location that I'd pointed out to it. So we've got that full history of what actually executed. So we're not losing out any of that debugging capability. But this is just a single parameter. And what I'm going to show you is how you can use powerful data generation to run thousands of parameters. So say, for instance, we want to extend this out to a much bigger subset. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly go and generate a whole stack of URLs. So let's just pick a country. So if I pick a country like Afghanistan, and then I take, say for instance, the top websites. So in this case, I've picked 10 more websites. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste those directly into my web page location. Right, so now I'm going to run those 10 websites, but also what I need to do is just quickly change the runtime settings so that it's going to run 10 times round. Right, but again, I'm not going to run this from the virtual user true client. What I want it to do is run it at the command line. So again, I'm executing that same script, and what we should see in the background is we should see a whole stack of Firefox browser proxies running in headless mode that will actually spin up and execute each one of those websites sequentially until it's executed all of the 10 web pages that I've passed over to it. So as you can see, it runs them and then writes the results out into a log file. So in this case, what we can do is put this into a big data store, and that will allow us to actually have a whole stack of results. So if I quickly go back to temp directory, you can see that we've now got one for each one of those websites. We've also got one for the combined. So we've got the two initial ones, the third one that we ran. With the last demo, I guess you can understand how you can potentially scale this to millions of websites, which is what we've been doing over the Christmas period, on Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and also today, the January sales. We've looked and taken those top 1 million websites and looked at how they're performing as far as performance, but also security and also functional. And this could include things like mobile. And this is where you can take advantage of things like StormRunner and StormRunner Load and StormRunner Functional to really be able to scale that. And what we've done is provided a report of the top 100 best performing websites during the sales periods within retail for this year's holiday season. But you can also go and grab your own free report if you navigate to the URL above, and all you need to do is put your company domain in and some details, and we will send you a report of how you've scored. And this will run thousands of different tests that will give you some really actionable insight that you can go off and actually improve some performance engineering. Okay, so we're just going to take a very simple example where we've modeled out a simple database schema, taken the necessary table information and column information that we want to extract from that database, And then what we're going to do is we'll use a very powerful data generation engine, which will be able to extract data, the necessary data we need, take hard-coded parameters that we may need for the environment, and also synthetically generate a huge amount of data. And we're talking millions of rows if we can't find the necessary data that already exists within the database. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the powerful functions which will allow us to actually generate synthetic data. So that could be the latitude, longitude that we take to embed within a GPX file, or it could be something as simple as taking valid or invalid customer names so that we can make sure when we generate and we do our execute of our run that we don't get any duplications of client information or the same addresses. So in this case, we may need addresses, but we may need addresses from different countries based on the workflow. So what we're going to do now that we've created our requirements for our data generation, we're going to upload that file, that data driver file, into Slack. And then what Slack's going to do is it's going to actually process it. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go off and generate all that necessary data. And then the next task it's going to do is it's going to look at actually executing that test against the load runner command line prompt to actually allow you to then run that in the back and then come back with the results. So in this case, you can see it's completed successfully. And now if we navigate over to those results, which have been processed and run, what we'll be able to see is not only that they've executed successfully, but actually we'll be able to see the whole console of all the debugging information. So within that Excel spreadsheet, all the information that's been created via the run, the virtual user, is actually being logged in here. So we can actually do stuff with this, whether that's we put it into some kind of NoSQL, Cassandra, MongoDB, or we look at putting those results back into our continuous integration tool or continuous deployment tool. And then third, you could get it so that it automatically sends you the results into, say, for instance, Outlook. So that way, when you have a look, you can actually look at what's been executed, what the values it used to execute that test, and what data it created, and what the request and response pairs came back out of that. As you can see, this is an extremely powerful capability, and it allows you to do this minimum viable performance test. That final demo hopefully gives you a bit of an idea of how we can start moving on to this next generation of cognitive learning, where we can use things like conversational AI to automate most of those workflows that are extremely tedious and data prep activities, and they can be done with a simple command line. So this could be, you just talking to a bot that allows you to say, I need to get some data for this particular project, I need this environment building, and the rest will be done automatically. Thank you.